So we do have a quorum. We'll call the meeting to order, and let's stand for the pledge. We pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I guess the first thing on the agenda is the review of our reopening plan for the district. And before we get there, I just want to say thank you to Tom and everyone that's been involved with this. We had one board member who was on one of the committees, Marcia, and just all the staff and everyone. They just the incredible amount of effort that went into this to make this what it is. And the quality of the work too is it's amazing. Every time we're up against something like this, a challenge of any sort, that the administration rises to the occasion and delivers an amazing product. So thank them for all they've done. And even with that, we get to the point where our plan is delivered and the state goes, well, now it's up to the districts to decide what they want to do. So of course, the last minute change. So anyway, I'll turn it over to Tom and let him walk us through the plan. And again, thank you everyone that was involved with this year of work. It's amazing what you've done.
Sure. I had sent board members and the public, it's online in board docs, the full PowerPoint we did with parents on Monday night. We had our first parent webinar going through a summary PowerPoint of our plan, as well as answering about 40 minutes of frequently asked questions. And it went very well. And I'm not going to go through all 40 slides tonight, but I wanted to highlight a couple in case there's parents watching the meeting tonight that did not make the webinar on Monday. And I know the chair recognized board involvement in the development of this plan. I know we had Marcia Benvenuti involved, Chris Jones served on committees, Michelle Devine and Pat Fedor, amongst 70 other staff in addition to administration. So it really is a broad-based input, and many of the staff who participated are also parents in the Waterford community and also brought that lens of parental input in the development of this plan, which was also important, obviously, consider. I want to just go through a couple of highlights. Is a working document. We'll be releasing another version later this week after receiving some input and further state guidance. The state continues release guidance on almost a daily basis, and there is more to come. I was on a call on last Friday, and I think there were about 6 topics that came up, from music to special education to other topics where the state said, yeah, you're going to get a release document on that as well. So it remains in draft format, and as we release new versions, we will include a page outlining what pages have been changed and by topic. So it truly is a working document. I think it's important for the board and the public to realize that we're not medical professionals, and certainly while the state's guiding document had broad medical input from Department of Public Health and epidemiologists and whatnot, we are also consulting the experts that we deal with, including our school district medical advisor. So we employ a medical advisor under a contract. He's an MD here in Southeastern Connecticut. He has reviewed and offered feedback on our plan, as well as Leah Hendricks, who's the supervisor of school health and wellness with the VNA, which staff our nurse's office. And the Ledgely Health District has been phenomenal to work with, and they have reviewed and offered feedback and input on the development of our plan. And I just can't thank those experts enough for providing that very important feedback. So as you know, we've been asked by the state to really prepare for 3 different possibilities, including on-campus learning, kids showing up 5 days a week on site, hybrid learning, which is 50% capacity on any given day, and distance learning, which is everybody learning from home. And I know we're going to talk about reopening models later in the meeting. On-campus learning and hybrid learning are currently the only options available to school districts. And hybrid became available on July 30th, which was last Thursday when we received written guidance from the state on that. As I said, full on-campus or hybrid to start, and distance learning would require approval from the Connecticut State Department of Education and Department of Public Health, which would really be predicated on health conditions in our county. They're going to be looking at that health data from a county perspective. Oops. Really want to touch upon that no matter which model we're operating under during the course of the year, at this time, per state requirement, we have to temporarily offer a distance learning option for families. So parents can say whether we're in hybrid or full on campus, parents can choose a temporary option for distance learning. Just want a couple of highlights to that. That will be a registration. We have to report that data to the state. So we'll be asking families via a survey that goes out the end of this week whether or not they want to opt into voluntary distance learning. And as I said, we're required to provide some programming for those students who will not be on campus. The State Department of Ed holds the right to take away this option at any point and force the return of students to campus. And again, this is a voluntary opportunity, and we're not necessarily saying it's going to equate one-to-one to an on-campus learning material. With that said, students and their families can opt back into on-campus learning or hybrid learning by letting us know, and we ask that it be up to a 2-week reentry period so that we can adequately prepare. Could be shorter than that, but we do ask for some notice on that. While students are on campus, I wanted to provide a couple of highlights from the plan. We're going to be in students' grades pre-K through 8, grouping students by fairly strict cohorts, meaning we'll have stable and steady groups of students in classrooms, basically the same students for the entire school day in grades pre-K through 8. With that said, we will see a cohort in its entirety move for opportunities such as phys ed when they go outside. At the high school level, you will not see that strict of a cohort that you see at the elementary level due to the various electives and various levels of classes that exist at the high school, from college prep to honors to AP and ECE. All aspects of the school day are tightly managed in our plan, from student arrival and dismissal, meals, movement through the day, mitigation strategies such as one-way hallways and directional stairwells and things of that nature. We'll be utilizing as much space in the building and the grounds as possible. Central office has started on-site building meetings this week. Yesterday, we were in 3 buildings, and the other 2 buildings are tomorrow, where we're really walking those spaces and walking the grounds and seeing where outdoor space can be utilized as well as indoor space. Obviously, from a health and safety perspective, our cleaning protocols, health and safety protocols, and other mitigation strategies such as face coverings and social distancing are vital components of the state plan and our plan. From a cleaning perspective, they'll be cleaning before the school day starts, during the school day, and after the school day. High touch surfaces such as handrails, sinks, door handles, light switches, bathrooms, obviously, throughout will be cleaned not only before and after the school day, but during the school day. Staff will have adequate cleaning supplies in the classroom to assist in the cleaning of high touch surfaces. There's a lot of training that has occurred with our custodial staff, and that will continue to occur. And again, all of this is in alignment with Connecticut, EPH, and CDC cleaning protocols. We're going to communicate those obviously to families. We're going to obviously have a compliance system. Each classroom in the district is provided with either a place to wash hands or hand sanitizer. And along with our cleaning protocols, we have a cleaning protocol for buses, both during usage and after usage. Face coverings is a question I'm getting quite often from parents. I say me, it's really the team. I just wanted to cover a couple of highlights. Face coverings are required of staff and students throughout the school day. We will be building in mask breaks for students throughout the school day. Those will take place outside when students are properly distanced, in inclement weather, in larger spaces such as perhaps a gymnasium. So, I mean, a lot of, I should say, the state did allow one exception this previous week in allowing pre-K students not to have to wear a mask all day, but K to 12, the requirement is there, including buses. Of course, if a student boards a bus, we'll have a mask supply on the bus so the student can put one on. I mentioned pre-K. There are specific state definitions around face coverings, face shields, and clear plastic barriers. I do want to point out in our classrooms, there is a provision within the state guidance that if we can identify a designated teaching area in the classroom, which is 6 feet or more from students, teachers have the option, teachers only, teachers have the option of removing their mask should the instruction, predicate that happen. And again, that's an option for teachers, not a requirement. In the guidelines, it says that designated teaching area has to be a minimum of 6 feet from students. But students cannot remove their mask during that time. There's a lot in our plan around what happens if we have a student or staff member in the building with probable symptoms. Each school in our district and really across the state has to identify what's called an isolation room, where that staff member or student would be sent to, as opposed to the nurse's office, which will be maintained to deal with the day-to-day health issues that are present in any school. That goes along with an associated isolation bathroom as well. Those isolation rooms are going to be staffed by VNA staff with the appropriate PPE. And again, our plan outlines much greater detail than I'm going into what the protocols are around that. And the goal is for the student to be picked up as soon as possible. And then we have a whole protocol how we'll deal with the local health district around that process. Ledgely Health District has also published a decision tree for schools to use in conjunction with them. What happens in the case of symptoms and a positive test, as well as a negative test. Really, what are our next steps now that we have a plan? And this is obviously in process. We're really operationalizing that plan at the school level. From signage all the way to lunches, arrival and dismissal. What does the daily schedule look like? Things of that nature. What's the room setup? All of those things. And that's really happening across our departments, whether it be building and grounds, IT, finance and operations, obviously curriculum and instruction and whatnot. Principals and their teams are hard at work developing school level plans around the district plan. And as they develop school specific information, that will obviously be pushed out to parents. We'll be holding a series of parent information webinars. Our first one was this past Monday. Our next one is Wednesday, August 12th at 5 o'clock. We held our first staff webinar today, and we're publishing FAQ documents on a regular basis. And one is due to go out tomorrow. I'll warn you, it's about 10 plus pages of frequently asked questions. but we're trying to answer every question that's submitted. The chair mentioned we had a broad-based committee. I really want to thank the team. This could not have happened if it was just myself and central office locked in a room. We really needed people who are going to be implementing this plan involved, and people stepped up on their own time, as the chair mentioned, and I mentioned over 70 staff really stepped up to do that. Just want to remind people, last meeting, the board approved some changes to the school calendar. First day of students attending is Monday, August 31st. And of course, our school calendar is always available on the website. And then just some reminders that we have a designated reopening email address, which people are using daily, which is great. We have a dedicated web page on reopening with a variety of resources. It goes well beyond just our district plan. And again, our webinars and distance learning forms and transportation forms will be sent by the end of the week. And that's really what I wanted to cover with the board as far as reopening. I know we're going to talk later on about a reopening model, but I'd be happy to answer any questions or comments.
Hey, Tom, it's Joy.
Hello.
Hi. I don't see anything here about data points and what data you're going to be collecting, who collects it, where does it get sent, and the process around that.
Yeah, it's a great question. We actually just received feedback from Ledge Light Health District yesterday, exactly what data they want to see from us. As we see spikes in absenteeism, they really want us to drill down with the homes and really make calls and ask parents, why is your child home today? What are the symptoms? Have you taken them to a doctor? Have they been tested? Those sorts of things. We'll be working very closely with Ledge Light Health District on that and monitoring in-school data through certainly our nurse's office. There's data collection around the isolation room, obviously name, date of birth, symptoms shown, all of those data points. So we will be in close contact, but we did just receive some guidance from Ledge Light on that yesterday, and that will be included in the next plan release end of this week.
Okay. All right. And do you have enough staff to collect this data? Do you need volunteers? Can you accept volunteers? How does that work?
Yeah, on a whole, embedded in our plan is really a limitation on visitors to the school buildings this year for obvious reasons, even including dismissal and drop off with parents. We'll be developing procedures where we'll be able to take that information right at the car. But to your point around staffing, while there are other staffing needs that Mr. Mancini will be going through later in the presentation, I can tell you from a nursing perspective, we're working with VNA to bring on 2 additional health aides in addition to our normal school year staffing. That will be floaters and will be sent to schools of need on any given day in the district. So we'll be bringing on 2 additional health aides to help with health, whether it be data reporting or assisting student or staff health.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Tom, it's Greg. This is pretty much a medical approach. At what point do we talk about how we're going to, with this hybrid or whatever we end up doing, how are we going to educate the kids? How are we going to meet our educational objectives? When we don't have the students in the classroom 5 days a week.
It's a great question, and I'm going to ask Mr. Powers to weigh in on the model we'll be implementing this year. It will be different than we saw for distance learning last spring. That model last spring of distance learning was built on the fly, obviously, as it was every case. And we've really listened to parent feedback and staff feedback as we head into this school year. So whether we're in hybrid or full, because even in full, Mr. Benoit, we might have students who opt for distance learning, which is allowable. So really in any of the 3 models, full in person, hybrid, or full distance, we're going to have kids at home who need to learn. And I'm going to ask Mr. Powers to talk about that.
Yes, thank you. So as Tom mentioned, we're going to move from an asynchronous approach, which we did in the spring, which was to have materials on the learning management system by 9 o'clock, and for kids to complete it kind of at their own pace throughout the day. And we're going to move to a synchronous system, which means that if there's a class going on at 9 o'clock, then you're attending that class. The teacher's taking attendance, whether you're in person or remote. With as Mr. Mancini will talk about later, with the CARES Act funds, we were able to purchase cameras for classrooms so that when a student who's distance learning joins Zoom, like we all are on now, instead of seeing the screen share that Tom is doing, they'll see the Promethean board, and they'll be able to hear the classroom discussion going on. They'll be able to raise their hand, just like we could use the raise your hand feature in Zoom, so the teacher can address the students' questions who are learning from home, just as well as the students who are in class. If the teacher needs to briefly use the video camera to show what's going on in the classroom for the students who are distance learning, they may do so for a brief period. We tested out the capacity of our robust technology infrastructure, and even with its being so robust, the amount of data being used for audio might be 1 unit, and the amount of data needed to do video is like 10 units. So the capacity of having 250 teachers with live cameras going on would really impact the ability for our system to handle it. So we're doing the audio stream. We're continuing, as we did in the spring, by using the learning management platforms of Seesaw for pre-K to 2 and Google Classroom for grades 3 through 12. And part of the professional development, the extra days that you had approved as a board, will be used on how to do better formative and performance-based assessments, because we know assessing children remotely was a challenge for us this spring. So that's a brief overview of how we're handling it.
Okay, is there any more questions?
All right, I have nothing else, Mr. Chair, under Superintendent's report at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. So that would bring us to new business, which is to talk about the MOU with the town of Waterford for the non-lapsing carryover account.
Sure, a little background. At a previous board meeting, Mr. Mancini and I presented some information to you about statutes that allow a Board of Ed to preserve end-of-year balance by virtue of a non-lapsing account maintained by the municipality. We received direction from you to approach the town about that, which we did at the June Board of Finance meeting. There was definitely at least a receptive ear to explore that. And at that time, the Board of Finance asked the first selectman to explore a draft MOU with us. And that's the MOU before you tonight, which would allow the board in the upcoming fiscal year to preserve 50% of what was turned back to the town on June 30th of the last fiscal year. Joe, anything you want to add to that?
No, I've used this same policy in multiple towns that I've been in before here. It's definitely going to be useful for this year. Round numbers, we're favorable, 665,000 last year. So this would give us an extra 332 for the year that we're in.
So with that, I'd be open to take a motion and a second on this so we can have some discussion.
I'll move approval of the memorandum of understanding with the town of Waterford on the non-lapsing carryover account as presented. And the superintendent be authorized to sign that memorandum of understanding on behalf of the Board of Education.
Second,
Okay, that's Greg and Marcia. Thank you both. Any discussion? Any discussion on this at all? Okay. So it's me. Question. We'll take it to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Item B is a discussion on the financial impact of the reopening. So we'll turn that over to Mr. Mancini.
Great. All right. So obviously this has been a very interesting time. We're doing forecasts that are basically predicated on people's behaviors, behaviors that we've never seen before. So it's important to remember that all the assumptions there in this are essentially based on what we know today, which is that the original plan that we submitted assumed a full in-person, full year schedule. And this was a relatively decent estimate as of this morning, and it'll probably change tomorrow. All right, so the first topic I want to talk about is supplies. Now, you might remember that at the end of last fiscal year, we did pre-purchase a whole litany of supplies. Having said that, the day-to-day demands that are placed on us as far as sanitization and cleaning, we're expecting at least an extra $70,000 worth of cleaning supplies. Those are broken up into chemicals, wipes. That's no hard equipment. This is just the sanitization chemicals that we're talking about using. Plexiglass partitions. Now, at the end of last year, we also bought some plexiglass that's used in front offices. The principals have expressed an interest in purchasing additional plexiglass partitions, especially when there's close proximity conversations that have to happen with be it SPED or other areas. The high school has a special need. If we're in full person, 100%, they don't have desks, they have tables. So we have to find ways to divide them. On to the next item, which was additional PPE, gowns, masks, and gloves. Now we've already purchased roughly 55,000 masks to be distributed this year. We have purchased enough gowns for the VNA to make it through the year, and the gloves, that's kind of a variable, but we have about 30,000 gloves in stock as well. But we do expect to see an exponential use of this equipment. Next item is the cameras. So as Craig was talking about with the model that they're talking about using for when children are not in the classrooms, these camera systems work out to about $17,325, and we'll talk about where that's being funded in a little bit. Zoom subscription. We have not gotten an affirmative from Zoom as to whether or not this is going to continue to be free for Board of Education this year, or whether we're going to have to pay. I have a general assumption that we're going to end up having to pay, especially given how much we're going to utilize this. I mean, there's the potential the Waterford Board of Ed will have over 120 feeds going a day, maybe even 150. Bottle filling stations. As you go through our plan, you'll notice that the state guidelines kind of eliminate the water bubblers. You know, the traditional, you push the button and water spouts out and child leans over and gets water. Now, any kind of water dispensing has to be directly to a bottle. Signage, we're expecting about $7,000 worth of signage. This is just a number grabbed out of the air. This is directional signage for the hallways, for stairwells, as well as putting up all the CDC recommended signs. Tents. This one is kind of to create additional education space outside of the classroom. So obviously this would be outside. These would be nice to get. They seem to be in relatively short supply, as looks like multiple municipalities in the state of Connecticut have come up with the same idea. Software, we're looking for any ways that we can reduce the touching of paper and whatever interactions we can limit with people. So today we signed off on a software application that'll help the elementaries with bus pickup. I'm sorry, with student pickup, not bus pickup. We're expecting ridership on buses to go from about 90% down to 50. So whereas this year we transported over 2,000 students, we're expecting about 1,000 to use the buses next year, which means those other 1,000 kids are going to be dropped off by parents. So we're trying to find ways to make that as efficient as possible. And then we just threw in about $420 for no-touch forehead thermometers. As people come to the building, we may actively screen, we may not. The children will not be actively screened, but guests could be. But we want to make sure that we have some on site in case someone is kind of displaying symptoms. All right, now on to the big one. So staffing, right? These are very large numbers, guys, and these are out of order on my sheet for some reason. So on certified staff, what we're looking at there is just a projection that I pulled together that's based on 27 of our certified staff opting not to come out under the opting not to come back under the CARES Act or CARES provisions. So if we have to fill those 27 spots in the building with a warm body, it's about $1.3 million. Now we think we can redeploy 7 other certified staff in the district, which will reduce some of that need. So that's where that $1 million comes in. Because when we're trying to project these numbers for this year, behaviors are going to change. A cold is no longer a cold. Allergies are no longer allergies. Our sick utilization is going to go through the roof. And it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just what we have to come to expect. I mean, this is going to be a different year. On the custodial expenses. So on the custodial side, we project that we're going to need an extra 45 hours per day of custodial support. And this is priced out on a per hour basis using existing staff. Now, if we staff it with new employees, obviously it'll be slightly less, but we'll continue to evaluate that.
And that's really a function of the enhanced protocols under CDC and DPH guidelines.
Correct. So it doesn't sound like much, but the custodians are required to, we're expected to sanitize each restroom twice a day. And we have upwards of 25 to 30 bathrooms in the elementaries up to the middle school. At the high school, we have 48 of them. So they'll be spending a lot of time just actually cleaning the bathrooms, hitting all the handrails, all the high touch areas. Now on to tutors. On the tutor side, this is something that's been identified under the CARES Act. This is for 4 tutors for 186 days for the year, being paid a slightly escalated rate of about $175 a day. Craig can talk about the need for that if there's any questions. Food service labor. So as we're trying to limit cohorts, we're expanding how long food service is gonna be working. We expect that to be upwards of $150,000 for this year. And I'm mixing labor and a little bit of additional cost because there's going to be some additional cleaning supplies that they're responsible for. Non-certified staff, this is just para subs. We felt that this is a reasonable projection for that. So staffing for recess and lunch. So for recesses, we're trying to segregate the kids out when they're out in the field into specific areas, but we're also spreading out the time and the duration that the kids are out there. So we're going to be lining the fields at the elementaries and having dedicated spots for areas. With that, we're going to have increased hours and increased people out there. And there's also an additional need for some help during the high school. So at the high school, we're going to be running 6 waves for food service. I'm sorry, for service. And with that, we're going to need people that are ensuring that the students are cleaning up after themselves, that they're putting away their trays, putting away their cups, just so that the custodians can get in there and clean the spaces in between each of those 6 waves. So again, this, in my opinion, this is kind of a worst case type scenario based on full in-person, given the current information that we have. But on to the next slide, I want to talk about some of the mitigating things that we're doing. So Craig talked briefly about the CARES Act. So from the CARES Act, Waterford was entitled to $254,417. We briefly talked about a couple of the items that we're spending it on, such as the intervention. I'm sorry, such as the tutors that we were talking about. I believe I said 5. I meant I believe I said 4. I meant 5. I apologize. The cameras that is going to be paid for under ESSER or under the CARES Act. $33,000 worth of the plexiglass will be paid under the CARES Act, and additional Chromebooks. We do expect the state to use, the red, yellow, green coding. It would be overly ambitious for us to assume that we will not have days where we will not be there. So we wanted to buy another 185 Chromebooks. So that's in the CARES Act for the federal offset. So general fund projections. Right now, I'm looking at this year. I think we've already cleared about $284,000. With summer school not being in person, we obviously didn't need to have the same demand of staff. So we saved about $42,000 there. In negotiations with STA, we were able to cut about $60,000 out of this year's budget. And because summer school wasn't in session, we saved another $45,000. So there's a copier extension. Every 5 years, the Waterford Board of Ed turns over some of their copiers. This last contract that we signed, we actually own the copiers at the end of them. So we're going to extend those copiers for another year. Now we do have a service contract that we pay on it, which is just a per page per printing cost, but that'll save us about $20,000 for this year. There was some favorability on the non-union raises. They came in about $20,000 less than we had budgeted. And as we've done in the past, we took advantage of being able to prepay some of the retirement benefits. We cleared about $90,000 there. So we created about $283,000 worth of room. The next line is the rollover account. As we said, we hope that the Board of Finance will approve the rollover account. That'll save us about another that'll give us another $332,000 to use. Meaning that as of right now, the knowns that we've identified amount to about $870,000. Now, items that we threw up as far as favorable projections, those are only items that we can absolutely count on. There's a lot of variables that are out there. And actually, I'll touch on that as we go through the next 2 lines. So right now, that we think that our exposure right now is about $1.2 million. Now, the unknowns that we have. So there's additional state funding that's available that's going to come down. We don't know what that dollar amount is. So the state of Connecticut took $90 million of the CARES Act, and they're going to dole it out this year. We don't know whether or not it's going to follow the same IDEA type approach that they did with the CARES Act. from earlier in the year, or whether or not they're going to dole it out on a per pupil basis. But $90 million spread across the state, it could be a few $100,000. And then there's unknown savings. Right now, we're all waiting for decisions on whether or not the state is going to allow us to have sports, or whether or not the boards are going to allow us to have sports. Each season of sports that don't happen saves us about $90,000. We also expect that with ridership being down on the bus side, we're going to see some savings. We pay on a per hour, per bus basis. If there's fewer kids riding on the buses should be running for less hours. Until we know which kids and how many kids are going to be riding the bus, we can't count on those savings yet, but they will happen. We also expect kids to opt out of being in school. Some of the we'll see lower electricity, hopefully. Well, there's a lot of items that we can still look to, but on August 5th, we're not ready to bank on. So that's about all I have.
Mr. Chair? Greg?
Yeah, go ahead, Marcia.
I have 4 questions for Joe.
$420.
Uh-oh, something's going on with the feed. Greg, freeze.
I have one question for Tom. Go ahead, Marcia.
Okay.
I don't.
I have 4 questions for Joe.
Yep.
But if you want to go ahead, Greg, be my guest. All right, I'll go with the 4 questions. My first question is the bottle filling.
Okay, well, it's just about the temperature testing. I don't.
I can't hear him.
I'm gonna mute Mr. Benoit temporarily and see if his feed clears up.
Okay, thank you.
So
Go ahead,
I'll continue then.
Yes,
with
please.
The bottle filling stations.
Yes.
Does that take care of every water fountain in every school building that we have?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
So the ones
Does it take care of 50%?
No.
I honestly don't know the count, Marcia. It's a good amount. Kids
I know.
won't have to walk very far to get to fill up with water.
I know Mr.
So-
Miner's on the call if he wants to weigh in. And really what this is a retrofit of our existing fountains. It's not a wholesale replacement. Mr. Miner, if you're on, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, we've got 140 some drinking fountains throughout the district. We're going to be starting off with around 40 modifications to the units. We have some bottle filling stations already in the high school and in the middle school, but because the drinking fountains, a lot of them are double units, we're only going to be modifying one of the units to use as a bottle station. The other drinking fountains will be bagged and closed off so that they cannot be used.
Is that going to be enough? You think? I mean, we're trying to keep the kids in the classroom, and I can see a backup at the bottle filling stations.
Well, the drinking fountains are in the hallways, the field house gym area, and in the outside of the classrooms in the main hallways. As far as filling the bottles in the classrooms, they can use the regular tap water.
Right.
I know all the elementary schools have sinks, but do the middle schools and the high schools don't have sinks, do they?
For the most part, no.
So what is the percentage of Clark Lane and Waterford High Schools reduction of availability of water?
We're probably going to be operating in the beginning of the year at about 30%.
So you have to understand, Marcia, there's nobody in the hallways. There's no changing of classes. So students in our plan, students are asked to bring their own water bottle to school, preferably filled.
Right.
And we'll have designated water filling times throughout the school day.
Okay, all right. So
Yep.
I just could see sending one kid out and then somebody else sends a kid out and there are 3 kids around the bottle filling station,
Won't happen.
Okay. Okay. My second question, custodians. is that because we're paying a lot of overtime, or are we hiring more? We're not hiring more, you said. We're using our existing staff. Is that correct,
So-
Joe?
So my projection that I gave, it would be a worst case scenario, right? So that would be using overtime or time and a half for 48 hours per day across 5 schools for 181 days.
Do you think it would be prudent to advertise for more custodians?
We're absolutely in the process of doing that, Marcia. But some of my concern, Marcia, is once you hire someone into a full-time status, you tend to own them.
Okay.
I don't know what your comfortability with is as far as the school remaining open on a full-time basis for the full year. But I don't know. Honestly, in my opinion, it would be more prudent to try and use your existing staff as much as possible. But having said that, the overtime is not going to be enough you're not going to have enough people that are willing to work that much overtime. So we will be having to hire new custodians as well.
Okay, thank you, Joe. 2 more. Waterford High School cafeteria, you mentioned that there were going to be 6 waves.
Yep.
That's always been a problem with capacity. What's the capacity? Are we putting tents outside to increase the capacity? Are we sending classes in every 20 minutes?
That's yet to be determined. We
Okay.
start our meetings with the high school tomorrow to begin to map out all the logistics. The high school administration has certainly been working on this, but central office will hear the plan tomorrow. So that's in development.
Okay. And one last question. I saw a great article on Sunday morning about bathrooms and urinals and the splash factor. And do we have urinals in our men's rooms?
I'm going to default to Jay. I have no idea.
Yeah, we do.
Okay. Isn't that an issue these days with urinals rather than stalls? I know in the plan it said about possibly blocking off stalls and everything, but the urinals, they're suggesting that you put the plexiglass between the urinals even.
Most of
Or
our
not use urinals.
Most of our bathroom urinals have partitions between them.
Oh.
If you'd like to go into the men's room, I'll escort you and you can check out what we have.
Okay.
No, but I think I have not seen any documentation from any health department as far as not using them.
Okay. All right. I know according to that program, the toilet manufacturers are in full swing on trying to figure out less splash and everything else. So even with the stalls. So I
Wish they thought of that with my 4 boys. I would have loved it.
Okay. That's my 4th question. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, if I could try, taking temperatures. You indicated that we're not going to take temperatures of each student. I'm not understanding that. I understand that taking temperatures takes time, but we're forced to act as in a role of a medical prophylactic facility. It seems to me that you take the temperature every single day of each and every person that goes into that building. That's your first glimpse, your first warning, your first radar check, if you will. I can't understand how we could not want to take the temperature of every single person entering the building every single day. Please explain.
I can comment on that. First of all, it's not recommended or required in the state plan, which is approved by CSD and Department of Public Health. The explanations I have been given is that a screening at the door is simply a snapshot in time, and that 5 minutes from that screening, the person can have a fever that didn't appear 5 minutes earlier. I think the other reason I've been given by the state for not screening folks every single day is the ability, for example, at the high school to get 1,000 people through the door in an efficient manner, socially distant. And compared to some high schools around the state, Danbury High School is, I think, 2,600 students. I couldn't even imagine that, but it's not required or recommended by DPH or CSDE.
Could I just add, I had similar concerns about the temperature taking, and I noticed in the plan it said that the parents were going to take the children's temperature before they sent them to school. Is there any way to check on that or reinforce the fact that how important that is for the parent to keep the child home if there is a fever?
We will be regularly communicating with families around that expectation. That's the best I can tell you.
Mr. Jones had some questions, or a question.
Hi, I have a few questions. My first, it's not a question, it's a recommendation or a thought. In terms of what Marcia was talking about with the maintenance line item that you mentioned, and about the whole issue of what Joe mentioned about owning the employee, have you looked at the option of doing contracted employees in terms of maintenance? So then you're not paying the insurance, you're not paying the benefits, and you're just doing salary, and then you contract it so you get extra help, and you can just contract it for a year or a half a year, and then you could save money that way. And then what happens if those people don't want to work the overtime, as you said? So my suggestion or thought would be to look into contracted maintenance employees. So, and I don't need you to respond. It's just a thought. If you want to respond, you're welcome to.
All options are on the table, Chris.
I can tell you from a labor law perspective, we would need the permission of the unit to outsource labor to an outside contractor.
Okay. Why Zoom and not Google Meets?
So
Who the best person is to answer that? I think stability of platform is one reason. I think familiarity as well. I don't know if either Ed or Craig, I don't know if Ed's on, but Ed or Craig want to comment on that?
Yeah, from what I was told by Ed, Zoom has a much more efficient data use. So when you're scaling it to the size that we are in the district, this would run most efficiently. So we used Google Meets in the spring, but Ed had recommended that we use Zoom district-wide, and this would also give the pre-K to 2 the option to listen into the classrooms and to see the Promethean board as well.
And to just back that up, I actually have an IT employee who's
cut out
listening.
after the pre-K to 2. I don't know that I heard you.
I think I can summarize what he was talking about. The bandwidth required by Zoom is less than Google Meets. And I actually had one of our IT workers who's taking care of this meeting for us, John Whalen, emailed me that our IT department did an actual bandwidth test, and Google Meets is double the bandwidth that Zoom is.
Okay, great. I know Mr. Powers mentioned it, and then Mr. Mancini mentioned it, but can you circle back really quick in your first part where Mr. Powers talked about the cameras in the classroom? I don't know that I understood all of that.
Sure. So again, in looking at how we can get students to hear the instruction, we first wanted to have them see the instruction as well as hear it. We had purchased cameras that will be plugged into the desktop computer that runs the Promethean board. Then through Zoom, the students can see the Promethean board, and using the audio of the camera can hear the instruction that's going on. And when a teacher may need to show some video that's not on the Promethean board but in class, they may turn on the camera to show the kids learning at home what's going on for a brief period of time. This way, the students can have as best a synchronous type of live learning as possible with available bandwidth, and with the fact that we have kids that will be learning from home irrespective of the model, full in, hybrid, or all distance learning.
So if I understand you correctly, and I just want to make sure I get this, let's say the middle school or the high school, let's just say there's 7 periods in the day. The student will have to go from math to English to science. When they're going through these classes, they have to go into the Zoom link. They can see the board. They can hear what's in the classroom, but they cannot see in the classroom. Is that correct?
That would be correct, unless the teacher needed to turn on the video portion again for a brief period of time to show something. We again, as the IT member said, we did an extensive bandwidth analysis of our very robust network, and the bandwidth needed for video is 10 times more than the bandwidth needed for audio, and we would not have the capacity to have the bandwidth needed to have live video. We would be getting these audio kind of delays and interruptions that are even occurring briefly in this meeting tonight.
It just seems like that's a lot for the teacher to navigate, to let the student in. Then if the student's there to ask a question, they can't see the student asking a question. How does the student ask a question? And I'm just throwing paint on the wall. It just seems like there's a lot of expectation from the teacher. And then how do they know if the kid's asking a question and then now the kid wants to make some loud outburst? I don't know. And it just seems like a lot, but I get it. I understand. Last question. The certified staff. Mr. Mancini mentioned the certified staff. Can you tell me again what they're going to be doing? Now, just unpack that line item for me again on certified staff.
I can jump in too, Joe, if that's helpful. So basically, if a staff member under the federal, Coronavirus Act, there's certain provisions around if they're high risk, if somebody in the household is high risk, and whatnot. We have some initial indications from staff. Now, we've not engaged them in one-on-one discussions yet and haven't asked for actual documentation yet. But based on self-reporting from certified staff, at this time, again, Joe said this is a projection, we have upwards of slightly over 24 certified staff that are saying they may have a health condition or somebody in their house is high risk, according to those federal guidelines that would prevent them from coming from work. Even if they are teaching remotely, if remote work was available, you still need a person in the classroom supervising that group of students, even if they're watching the teacher on the promo board teach the lesson from their home. So upwards at this time, 27 staff, we have to backfill their jobs in the building, even though they might be teaching remotely.
And state law requires they be certified, correct?
Not necessarily. This really is backfilling of really long-term subs, minimally a bachelor's. The teacher of record, if they're teaching remotely, the teacher of record is that teacher. If remote work for that teacher is not available, then we are hiring somebody certified in that to be the teacher of record.
So is that line item subs and certified staff, or is it just certified staff?
It is staff that we would have to hire for certified staff that have identified that they're probable in not returning this fall.
durational or not durational?
Could be both. Minimally, they'll all have a bachelor's degree because you have to have a bachelor's degree to be a substitute teacher. The teacher of record, if our teacher is at home teaching remotely, they're the teacher of record, they're certified, then we only need somebody with a bachelor's in the classroom to supervise the instruction and make sure kids are behaving and focused. If remote work is not available for that teacher who has said they can't come to work, then we do need to hire somebody certified in that particular area.
Okay. Thank you.
Michelle?
Yes, so my questions are, well, one recommendation, I'm sure you've already thought of it, but I'll bring it up. You know, again, in my world, we're already seeing supplies being ordered and taken because they're, you know, when the rates went up, masks were disappearing and hand sanitizer was disappearing. So I'm hoping that that's going to be under lock and key and signed out and rationed, and you know, we know who signed it out or took it, so that we don't lose these large amounts of product that is purchased. That's just one comment. The other thing is when the students are virtually working from home on their day that they're at home, and this is a concern of many parents, I don't know if you've heard of it yet or heard about it yet, parents may still have to go to work and their child might not necessarily show up for their science or their math class. How is this working in terms of absenteeism and absentees? If the student may show up for science, but then they get tired or lazy or go off to eat or go off and play a video game and they weren't there for math, but then they forgot and they showed up. Do you know any of that, and will it be strongly written out for parents so that they can understand how this is going to work in terms of absenteeism?
So, Michelle, we are awaiting state guidance on those exact issues as far as, you know, consistent statewide. So that is one of the topics I mentioned earlier in the call, not this topic specifically, around those exact issues, that if a student is in distance learning, whether it's temporarily opting into distance learning or if it's during hybrid, if they can't access the synchronous model, what are our responsibilities as a district? And if they can access the synchronous model but are choosing not to tune in and participate, what is the guidance to districts around attendance and grading and all of that? So that is one of those pieces of information that CSDE is telling us is coming.
Okay, yeah, because I'm hearing already that this is a concern for parents that have to work, and obviously they don't want their child to miss anything and they want them to be educated, but we know some kids of certain ages have, you know, different mindsets and may not follow through. So, okay. And I think that's it. I had one more question, but I didn't write it down, so I can't remember. But thank you very much, you guys. I know that you're doing a lot, and all of the documentation has been wonderful. I know that I've asked a lot of people if they've read it, if they've looked at it. There's a lot of parents saying, you know, there's so much information, they don't know what to read, they don't, you know, I missed that. I would hope that we can get the message out, everyone on the board and everyone can get the message out, you know, to parents that we understand there's a lot going out, but it's very important that they read this and they fully understand it so they're not asking the same questions over and over again. But thank you for all of your hard work.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's covered by these webinars, and that's kind of the purpose, is to get the information out to people and be able to respond to questions and concerns.
Oh, I get it. I was just very surprised on the webinar. At least from, I assume that the number at the bottom is the accurate number of who's watching. Is that correct, Tom? Like when I'm
Yes, I think we were upwards just shy of 200 at any one time.
Okay. And I know not everyone can make that time, and offering different times would be great. I guess for me, I was expecting more parents, and maybe that's just optimistic of myself.
They are being recorded and archived, so if parents can't make it, they can watch it at a later time too. So yes.
Excellent. Good.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments for?
Greg, I have a question.
Sure.
Tom, I looked at the PowerPoint and I'm on the slide of the COVID-19 decision tree. And I'm on the slide that says COVID-19 decision tree for students and staff. So tell me, what is the plan and how does that look if someone does test positive? So a kid at the middle school, a kid at the high school or wherever, now they've tested positive. What do you do, and then what happens? Like, do you tell parents? How does that look?
Yep. So in our full plan, which is obviously not in this document, on page, and I don't expect you to flip to this, Mr. Jones. This is just for any parents or public watching. We have a whole return to work or school, because it could be a staff member that tests positive, on page 28. And this will be slightly revised after today, after the feedback we received from Ledgelight about the latest guidance from CDC. But there are health hurdles that a staff member or student who tests positive have to clear in order to return. From a communication standpoint, what parents will be told, there's an entire communications protocol on page 13 in our plan that really goes through who will be told and when and how and those sorts of things. And those sorts of decisions will be heavily guided from Ledgelight Health District. As Mr. Benoit pointed out, we're educators and we're going to take the lead of our public health directors. But we do have protocols. I can tell you, again, the state has said that they hope to release a statewide protocol for notification and return to school and work protocols, because I think what they're finding is each area of the state is developing a protocol based on the local health district. So what we have has been vetted by Ledgelight, as well as our medical advisor in VNA. But we do have a communication protocol in what the actual health metrics are that a person has to display in order to return to school or work.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have anything that they'd like to add? Okay, so since that, we'll move on to C, which under new business, which is discussion on the reopening model. And Tom, I assume this is going to be based around the memo he sent out with the hybrid plan to full in an assessment and possible full in later on.
Yeah, I mean, I can give a little bit of background, just summarizing the memo that I sent to the board yesterday. Up until last Thursday, when we received flexibility in writing from state government, the only option was to open full in person. We received written guidance on Thursday, June 30th, allowing some flexibility in reopening, with hybrid now being an option. And I summarized basically yesterday we had an area superintendent's call, which is basically Guilford to Stonington as far north as I mentioned, those other districts. The vast majority of districts, with the exception of a few smaller districts, considerably smaller than, say, the size of Waterford, are opting for a phase-in approach, meaning open and hybrid, and reassess early October for the return to full in-person. This approach has several advantages. A phase-in approach of starting in hybrid and reassessing early October would allow us to thoroughly train and practice protocols with reduced density in the building. It would allow us to build confidence among stakeholders and reduce anxiety, hopefully. Smaller class sizes on the outset would also allow us to target social and emotional supports, as well as teachers with all that they're going to have on their plates around procedures and protocols and compliance, with less kids in the classroom on any given day, would allow them to really perhaps build one-on-one relationships with their students at a faster rate than if they had a full class. And finally, this approach would support the implementation of our synchronous distance learning model with those students that were home on given days, as well as those students that opted for full distance learning, before we might have to revert to full distance learning later in the year, depending on the health metrics. I'm supportive of the way the region seems to be going. We're talking upwards of 25 or 30 towns. This phase-in approach is consistent with how other sectors of our society have opened. But ultimately, I'm here to answer board questions or comments. I can tell you from a parent perspective, I'm going to say 90 to 95% or more of the emails over the last 2 weeks are really advocating for a hybrid opening. I'm calling it a phase into full in person. The metrics that the State Department of Ed and DPH are releasing, according to their metrics, support full in person, but I think a hybrid to reassess for full makes sense given the complexities of reopening.
You're comfortable with October 5th as the reassessment date?
Yeah, I think I would advocate around early October. I'm saying on or about October 5th, we reassess. That will be about approximately five full weeks in. And we can see what the landscape bears at that time.
I'm just thinking for purposes of a motion to approve a plan going forward that we set a date.
Greg, could I ask a question here?
Certainly.
This reassessment, is it a medical reassessment, or is it going to be an educational reassessment?
I think it's both of those, Mr. Benoit. I think it's both of those. I think it's looking at what the health metrics are in our town and region and county. I think it's from an instructional standpoint, and I'll add one more. I think it's from a logistical and mitigation standpoint. Are we able to adequately meet those 5 mitigation strategies of social distancing, mask wearing, cohorting, washing hands, and proper cleaning protocols? So I think a 5-week time frame will not only give us more information on the metrics and how instruction is going, but how well are we doing from a logistical standpoint, being able to meet those mitigation strategies effectively in a school building. So I think it's really those 3 buckets.
At some point, the ball has to be put in the other court. Our job is to educate. And we have to evaluate how well we're doing our educational job. It's for other branches of government to address how society is dealing with this COVID-19 crisis. And if that means that they have to tell us how we have to scale back or modify our educational process, so be it. But we've got to let them know loud and clear whether or not we're able to do, whether or not we're doing our job. Otherwise, they can't factor that in making and giving directions to us from a health and safety perspective. Thank you.
I have a couple of comments or questions. Mr. Chair?
Yep, go ahead. Sorry.
Along the reassessment timeline, you're saying October 5th for the reassessment. How long will it take to do the reassessment? You anticipate?
I think what we're talking about there is I think we're gathering information throughout that first 5 weeks of school. And I think the reassessment is going to be an ongoing assessment throughout those 5 weeks. So I would think by the early October, on or about October 5th, we'd be in a position to share information, you know, of how things are going, and are we prepared to go to full in person?
Okay, so it's not that October 5th is the date where you're going to reassess, and then it's going to take 2 more weeks to figure out if this is, should we go hybrid or should we go in school? It's October 5th, and then we'll have a board meeting, and pretty much all the data will be there.
That would be the goal.
Okay, awesome. My other question is, when you're talking about the synchronous plan, and I just want to make sure I understand it. I've heard a lot of talk about it, and I think it's a great idea. Is it true that, okay, your Monday, Thursday kids are in the school, and your Tuesday, Friday kids are watching on the video? They are watching the same show, and then when the teacher on the Monday and then the Tuesday gives 2 separate lessons, 2 distinctly different lessons, probably on the same unit, but they're not the same lesson repeated, correct? Am I correct in that? We're not doing a repeat. We're not.
No, we're talking 4 distinct days of instruction. So
Okay. So
on Monday,
yeah.
It's not a repeat.
Okay, that I just want to make sure we weren't losing 90 days of instruction.
Right. And the advantage to a synchronous model is we feel, and I think our teachers feel who were involved in the development of this, it does allow us to continue to cover our curriculum. And I don't know if Craig has anything to add, but so it's definitely not a repeat.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's put a motion forward for this with the phased-in approach, which is the hybrid model, with a date of October 5th for a reassessment, and then possible changeover to a full-in school model from that point forward, which is obviously open to change based on conditions out of our control.
The only recommendation I would have, Mr. Chair, is that it be on or about October 5th, so we're not tied to a specific day.
Okay.
Let's say the board wasn't available for a meeting on October 5th, so I would just suggest we do on or about.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
I'd like to move that the Waterford Board of Education approves the reopening of schools model of the hybrid type for the fall of 2020 as presented, and do a reassessment on or about October 5th, 2020.
I second.
It sounded like Michelle second there, Marcia with a motion. Okay, any discussion?
Yes.
Go
Tom,
ahead, Chris.
am I
Yeah.
correct in saying you don't need board approval for this? So why do we have to approve this? If I'm understanding correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, these decisions on the plans can be done by the superintendent. And the reason I ask that is because, to your point, tomorrow the plan changes. Tomorrow, the governor, the CDC, someone says, oh, we're doing ABC. why does it have to go back to board approval? Do we need a motion? Tom?
So two factors. I think I think it sends a strong message to the community if a plan has board support. I think, and secondly, it was on the advice of legal counsel to bring this forward to a vote from the board, at least for the initial reopening plan.
Am I correct in saying that the commissioner said that you don't need board approval, or am I incorrect? And I'm only asking, not that I'm against the plan. If the plan changes, I don't want to delay you in your process that you have to come back to us. Like you said, what happens if this changes in a week? Do you have to bring it back to us? And not that I'm against the plan, I'm just trying to streamline the plan to make it better for you.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't. There's no requirement from the state that that requires board approval or any time in the future, whether we were to flip to full in person. I think the advice of legal counsel is to have at least the initial reopening model approved by the board. Certainly, to your point, Chris, it's not required now and would not be required for any subsequent changes to full in person. I think certainly a flip to full in person would warrant a board discussion, not necessarily approval. But
so I guess my next question is, should the motion be amended that if based upon health guidance or based upon a decision on the superintendent, that you be empowered to change the plan? I'm just trying to make it easier for you. I'm not trying to slow it down. I'm just looking to make it easier for you that you don't have to bring us back.
I'd be fine with that, but that's ultimately up to board members.
Aren't we just approving that there's 3 options, that there can be 3 options, and what those 3 options look like are at the discretion of the superintendent and his team, and we're just saying that the 3 are the ones we're agreeing to at this point?
I believe the motion was for the hybrid model, to adopt the hybrid model for the opening of school.
Right. Start with hybrid with a date around beginning of October to reassess things and possibly go into, at that point to decide whether we're going full in.
Craig, I'll do whatever we want. I just wanted to make it easier for Tom if the plan changed that we didn't have to bring it back.
I'm fine with that too. And it would be up to Marcia if she'd be okay with a friendly amendment to that motion. And
I think Tom said it was just on advice of counsel, and it was also it's nice to see the board support a plan and be behind a plan. I don't think this motion restricts Tom's ability to change it on a dime if he needs to. Is that correct, Tom?
Certainly, under board bylaws and board policy, you hire me to certainly make the decisions, and there's no requirement in the future that a change in model require board approval. I think what Mr. Jones is suggesting is that, do we want to make it clear in the motion that if societal or health conditions dictated a change, that I'm empowered to enact and respond to that information as opposed to bringing it back to the board.
I have no problem with that amendment.
Okay.
Would somebody for the just record keeping
I don't think, Tom, you even need that, do you? I mean,
no, I don't either. But if that's
so why would we? Why would we do that?
Chris, do you want to make that amendment or not?
No, I'm fine with it. Tom, I just want to support you that you're not having to bring it back. And I just want to support you. I'm fine with the plan. I just don't want it that if it changes, and we all know it's changing every day, I want to be able to help you and support you that it's not brought back. So I'm fine with the motion.
Yeah, I think we're covered because we're just kind of approving the initial kind of the kickoff of this thing, and then it goes from there. It's it'll change if it has to or whatever. So,
I'm good.
okay, so we do have the motion and a second, and again, we're still open for discussion if anyone has anything. Okay, I don't hear any discussion, any questions or concerns, so we'll take it to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Anyone opposed? Anyone abstain? Okay, motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just thank everyone for their just the tremendous amount of work that went into this. It's incredible. Next will be the discussion. We're on item D, which is discussion of possible action on bylaw 9314. Suspension of policies, bylaws, and regulations to address temporary COVID-19 policies.
So this is to have us be able to pass the 16 COVID-related policies with the first read. Our current policy rule says only a first read would be only with state and federal requirements. These aren't requirements, they're just best practice.
And Craig, the vote required is what?
It's a 2/3 membership vote to suspend the policy so that we could.
Do we have enough board members in attendance to represent that 2/3? I didn't check the quorum.
Yep, you do.
Okay.
Okay, happy to take a motion on that, please.
I move that the Waterford Board of Ed suspend bylaw 9311, formulation of board policy for the August 5th, 2020 special meeting to approve the non-statutory but COVID-19 related temporary policies at first reading.
Second.
And just to correction, it's 9314 is the policy.
Geez, it might be, I'm sorry, Craig, my crypt notes, it was 9311.
No, it's okay. Okay, any discussion? That was motion by Greg, second by Marcia. Any discussion? Okay, we'll take it to a vote. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries unanimously on to E, the first reading of the temporary COVID policies.
Yes, so, this is a fairly unprecedented board meeting where before you tonight is 16 policies, all COVID related, to hopefully we would approve at tonight's meeting so that we could institute those into the annual notifications and school handbooks. I don't know, Mr. Chair, if what would be better, to go over each policy or to see if board members have questions on any of these policies?
I think it would probably, I don't know that reviewing all the policies is necessary. I mean, everyone has these in their packets and we're able to review them ahead of time, I would hope. And if they have any questions, they can bring them up after the motion is made and seconded. We can answer and address any questions, concerns there. So with that, I'd be happy to take a motion for this this chunk of policies here, 16 policies.
Mr. Chair, point of order. Do you,
Yes.
in the motion, do we have to read half a page of, or can we just say how can we facilitate this
I
motion?
think if you say the C19 policies, because they're all going to sunset on June 30th, 2021, unless the board takes affirmative action to extend them.
So moved.
That was easy.
I second.
Thank you, Joy. Any discussion? Any questions on these policies before we move forward? Okay. We will take it to a vote then. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anyone abstain? Okay. Motion carries unanimously. Last item under new business is the first reading of 1, 2, 3 policies.
Correct. So we have 3 non-COVID related policies, but the first one is flipping my notes, so sorry. A policy on purchasing. So this has been ended. Nope, sorry, this is a brand new policy. The actions have been in practice for a long time. This policy was suggested by our auditors who annually audit our finances, and they noticed that we didn't have a stated policy on how we do purchasing of federal funds. So this is a first reading of this new policy. If there are any questions, I can address them now. Otherwise, no action needs to be taken tonight.
Okay, thank you very much.
The next policy then would be a change to the undirected play period. And there is a clearer delineation of what the exceptions could be for the 20-minute of recess or undirected play based upon PPT decisions or 504 decisions. If there are any questions on that. And
Chair, would you like a motion?
This is just a first reading.
I believe on the other 2, we can act, no? Am I
yeah,
wrong?
this was had a statutory implication. So if you wanted to approve that tonight, you are within your power.
So, Mr. Chair, would you like to,
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with that if you'd like to.
that the Waterford, I would move that the Waterford Board of Education approves policy 5120, physical activity, undirected play, and student discipline, and policy 5160, section 504 ADA as presented.
Second.
Okay, any questions? Okay, so we'll take that to a vote. And all those in favor of approving those
Aye.
policies?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstain? Okay. Motion carries.
And the
I
last
just
one
want to go,
was,
hold on just one second, Mr. Powers. I just want to go back to that last motion. I'm not sure if we mixed policies on that.
yeah, it really pertains to policy 5121, physical activity, undirected play, and student discipline.
Is that 1520, Craig, or 51? You said 5110. I think it's 5120. Am I
I
right?
stand Mr. Benoit, that is correct.
Yep, 5120.
So that should be the motion at hand, because the last one is simply a regulation change on the 504 information. And per policy, you don't have to approve regulations. That's the administrative way to adjudicate the policy. But we wanted to bring forth what changes we're doing to the regulation.
I thought Marcia was on point and was just, weren't you, Marcia, just to that one
I was
policy?
just using the crib sheet like you were.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that included the section 504 ADA.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I'll do whatever you'd like.
the 504 is really just a regulation. We're not changing the policy. So
Okay.
to
Would you like
affirmatively approve no changes to that policy would be hold harmless. It's just the regulations that have changed.
Do you need me to go back and amend that?
We probably should just keep it clean.
Okay, so I'll rescind that motion and go with just approving the policy 5120. Is that correct now?
Yes,
Okay, good.
thank you. And, we'll need a second for that as well, again.
Second,
Uh,
that was Pat.
Any discussion? Okay, we'll take it to vote. All those in favor of approving policy 5120?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Anyone abstain? Okay, motion carries. So
And if questions about the regulation change, I'd be happy to try to address it tonight, but otherwise that's for the board's information.
Right. Okay, thank you. So it doesn't sound like anyone has any questions on that, so that brings us to a motion for adjournment, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Joy.
That's Joy.
Second,
Sound like Amanda, right?
Pat.
Oh, Pat, got it. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Any abstains? We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Good night, everyone.